To my father. I was a 33-year-old failure, a college dropout who survived on luck and family pity. He built his entire life around the loud, shiny performance of success, so he never noticed that silence was where the real power lived, while he was bragging at country club dinners. I was talking armed men down from ledges and managing crises that headlines never saw. He called me worthless, never suspecting I was the one person trained to save him. The gravel crunching beneath the tires of my sedan sounded like bones breaking. It was a violent sound, distinct and rhythmic, marking the final approach to the house where I had learned to be invisible. My father, Grant Coleman, lived in a sprawling colonial revival that sat on 3 acres of manicured lawn, a monument to American stability and upper-crust success. To the casual observer, the house whispered of old money and Sunday roasts. To me, it screamed of silence and perfectly managed perception. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror before killing the engine. At 33, I looked nothing like the frightened girl who had fled this driveway over a decade ago. My hair was pulled back in a severe, functional knot. My blazer was inexpensive but tailored to allow for movement. I took a breath, holding it for 4 seconds, releasing it for 4, a box breathing technique. It was a habit I picked up in training, not for family dinners, but for high-stakes standoffs. Lately, the difference between the two felt negligible. I was here for a reset. That was the term my stepmother, Elena, had used on the phone. Just a small dinner, no press, no business partners, just family. A neutral ground to see if we could exist in the same room without drawing blood. I opened the car door and stepped out into the humid evening air. The front door of the house was already open, framing my father in the golden light of the entryway. He held a tumbler of scotch in one hand, his posture relaxed but dominant. He was a handsome man, aging with the kind of silver-haired dignity that plays well in boardrooms and charity luncheons. He watched me walk up the path, his eyes scanning my outfit, my car, my entire presentation. I knew what he saw. He saw a disappointment. He saw a woman who had flamed out of a doctorate program at 22 and never recovered. "Hello." "Dad," I said, stopping at the threshold. Grant Coleman smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. It never did. "Madeline," he said, his voice a rich baritone that commanded attention. "You are late." I checked my watch. It was exactly 6 o'clock. "I am right on time," I said. He stepped back, waving his glass vaguely toward the interior of the house. "Time is relative, sweetheart. When you have nowhere important to be, I suppose 6 o'clock feels like an achievement. Come in. Your cousin Julian is here." I stepped inside, the familiar scent of lemon polish and aged wood hitting me instantly. It was the smell of my childhood, a sensory trigger that usually made my stomach turn. Tonight, however, I engaged the other part of my brain, the part that assessed threats, the part that categorized tone, pitch, and stance. Grant was aggressive but stable. He was posturing. This was not a rage state. It was a dominance display. I could work with that. We moved into the living room, where the furniture was too expensive to be comfortable. My cousin Julian was standing by the fireplace, looking uncomfortable in a suit that was slightly too tight across the shoulders. Julian was the family golden boy, a vice president at a logistics firm, loud about his bonuses and quiet about his anxieties. "Maddie!" Julian exclaimed, seemingly relieved to have a buffer. "Good to see you." "Hi, Julian," I said, taking the hand he offered. "You look tired." "The merger going well?" Julian blinked, surprised that I knew about the merger. I made it my business to know things. Information was the only currency that mattered in this house. "Even if I never spent it, it is brutal," Julian admitted, loosening his tie. "But the payout is going to be insane. We are talking 7 figures if we close by the 3rd quarter. Grant laughed, a sharp, barking sound. He walked over and clapped a hand on Julian's shoulder, squeezing hard enough to make Julian flinch. "Now that is what I like to hear," Grant said, beaming at Julian while looking directly at me. "Ambition, drive, tangible results. Julian, Tell Madeline what you just told me about the new acquisition. She might not understand the financials, but she can appreciate the scale. I took a seat on the edge of a cream-colored armchair. Keeping my back straight, I did not defend myself. I did not say that I understood the financials perfectly well. I sat in the silence, letting Grant fill it. Julian looked awkward. He shifted his weight. It is just a big shipping contract. Maddie, boring stuff. Really? Nonsense. Grant interrupted. Pacing the rug, it is the lifeblood of the economy. It is real work, unlike whatever it is you're doing these days. Madeline, what is it this month? Still answering phones at that temp agency? I took a sip of the sparkling water Elena had left on the coaster for me. I watched Grant's hands. He was gesturing wide, taking up space. He was performing for an audience of 2. I work in consulting. Dad, you know that. Consulting. He sneered, testing the word like it was spoiled milk. That is a polite word for unemployed, or unemployable. He turned back to Julian, his expression shifting from disdain to conspiratorial warmth. She had so much potential. You know, top of her class at the university, recruited for that accelerated program in behavioral psychology. We thought she was going to be a senator or a surgeon, then, poof, gone. Dropped out 1 month before qualifications. I kept my face neutral. This was the narrative, the tragedy of Madeline Coleman, the brilliant girl who cracked under pressure. He told this story at every gathering, polishing the details like a favorite stone. He needed my failure. It highlighted his own resilience. If I was the wreckage, he was the lighthouse that remained standing. You have to admit, Madeline, Grant continued, prodding me, looking for a reaction. It is a waste. You are 33 years old. You live in a shoebox apartment. You drive a car that sounds like a lawnmower. You are surviving on luck and pity. I felt a flash of heat in my chest, a biological response to the humiliation. But I pushed it down, categorizing it as irrelevant data. I looked at Julian. He was staring at his shoes, mortified. He wanted to leave. If Grant kept pushing, Julian would excuse himself, and Grant would lose his audience. Grant needed the audience more than he needed to hurt me. I decided to de-escalate. Julian, I said, keeping my voice low and even. I heard your daughter started piano lessons. How is she liking it? The change in subject was abrupt but gentle. I offered Julian a lifeline, an exit ramp from the awkwardness. He grabbed it immediately. She loves it, Julian said, his face brightening. She is actually really good. The teacher says she has perfect pitch. Grant opened his mouth to bring the conversation back to my inadequacies. But I leaned forward, angling my body toward Julian, effectively cutting Grant out of the visual circuit. It was a subtle physical block. That is incredible, I said. You must be proud. I am, Julian said. Grant stood there, his mouth slightly open, his rhythm disrupted. He took a heavy swallow of his scotch. He was annoyed, but the tension had dissipated. I had managed the room. I had protected Julian from the fallout of Grant's ego, and I had protected myself from a prolonged interrogation. Just then, the doorbell rang. Grant frowned. He was not expecting anyone. He hated surprises. Surprises were variables he could not control. Elena, my stepmother, fluttered into the room from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. She was a bird-like woman, nervous and perpetually exhausted from the effort of maintaining Grant's orbit. I will get it, she said quickly, rushing to the door before Grant could complain. I heard the heavy oak door creak open, followed by a booming, jovial voice. Grant Coleman, please tell me you are holding court in there. Grant's face transformed instantly. The scowl vanished, replaced by a practiced, winning smile. His shoulders dropped, his chest puffed out. It was a transformation so complete, it was almost sociopathic. That sounds like Arthur Pendon, Grant shouted back, moving toward the hallway with open arms. Arthur Pendon, I knew the name. He was a local developer turned philanthropist, a man who sat on half the hospital boards in the state. He was heavy, red-faced, and radiated the kind of wealthy confidence that made him feel entitled to walk into people's houses unannounced. Arthur walked into the living room, shaking Grant's hand with vigor. I apologize for the intrusion. Grant, Arthur said. I was in the neighborhood inspecting the new country club renovations, and I just had to stop by. Grant laughed, a sound of pure warmth. Arthur, you are never an intrusion. Can I get you a drink? Scotch? Maybe a brandy? No, no, I cannot stay. Arthur said, I just wanted to ask you personally. The Children's Charity Gala is next month. We had a speaker drop out. A utter disaster. I need someone with gravitas. Grant, someone the community respects. I need you to give the keynote. Grant paused for effect. He looked down at the floor. Feigning humility, it was a masterclass in false modesty. Arthur, I am flattered, truly. But are you sure? There are so many others more worthy. Arthur waved a hand. Stop it. You are a pillar of this town. Grant, you built a business from the ground up. You raised a family. You represent the best of us. Please, say yes. Grant looked up, his eyes shining. This was his drug. Public validation. Well, when you put it that way, Grant said softly, I would be honored. Wonderful. Arthur clapped his hands. My assistant will send over the details. I will let you get back to your family. Arthur turned to leave, his eyes glazing over me and Julian as if we were part of the furniture. He did not introduce himself. We did not matter. We were props in Grant's scene. Grant walked him to the door, laughing at some joke Arthur made. When the door clicked shut, Grant returned to the living room. He was high on the adrenaline of it. He looked at me, his eyes gleaming with triumph. Did you hear that? He asked. The keynote. That is 500 people. The mayor will be there. That is great, Dad, I said. He sneered at my lack of enthusiasm. It is respect. Madeline, that is what respect looks like. You build something real, and people notice. You should take notes. Dinner is ready, Elena announced from the doorway. Her voice was thin, brittle. We moved to the dining room. The table was set with the good china, the silver that had to be hand-washed. I sat across from Julian. Grant sat at the head. Elena sat to his right. The conversation during the salad course was a monologue. Grant talked about the gala. He talked about what he would wear. He talked about the speech he would write. He talked about the incompetence of the previous year's speaker. I ate mechanically, counting the chews. I was dissecting his behavior. He was manic. The validation from Arthur had spiked his dopamine. But underneath it, there was anxiety. He was already terrified of messing it up. When Grant was terrified, he lashed out. Excuse me, I said, I need to use the restroom. I stood up and walked toward the hallway. I did not go to the restroom. I went to the kitchen to get a glass of water, needing a moment of silence. The kitchen was gleaming, sterile. Elena followed me in a moment later. She closed the swinging door behind her, checking to make sure it was fully shut. She looked terrified. Maddie, she whispered, grabbing my arm. Please what? I asked, pulling my arm away gently. Just keep the peace, she said, her eyes pleading. He has been on edge for weeks. Business has been complicated. If he starts in on you, just nod. Just take it. Please, if you fight back, he will be impossible for days. I have to live with him. Maddie, you get to leave. I looked at her. I saw a woman who had traded her autonomy for comfort, and now found the price was higher than she expected. I am not fighting him. Elena, I said calmly, I am just eating salad. He feels threatened by the cousins, she said, as if that excused it. He needs to feel like the patriarch. Just let him have the win. I looked at the stainless steel refrigerator. It was a mirror. I saw my own face. Impassive. I always let him have the win. Elena, that is why I'm here. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A single, sharp vibration. I pulled it out, expecting a notification from my landlord or a spam email. It was a text message from a number I did not recognize. The area code was local, but the prefix was one often used by burner apps. I opened the message. If he is your father, you should know what he buried. Below the text was an image. I tapped it to enlarge. It was a blurry photo of a physical ledger. the kind used in accounting before everything went digital. The handwriting was cramped and specific. I recognized the slant of the numbers. I recognized the shorthand. It was a page from a construction payout log. The date at the top of the page was from 12 years ago. The entry highlighted in the center of the photo showed a payout of $50,000. Next to it, in the column for recipient, it just said, Consultant, Inspection Results. I stared at the screen. My heart rate did not jump. My breathing did not hitch. My training took over. Analysis. The sender has access to physical records. The sender knows my relationship to Grant. The sender knows my personal cell phone number, which is not easy to find. This is a targeted communication. Objective: intimidation or leverage. Immediate action. Do not reply. Trace. I quickly switched apps. Running the number through a reverse lookup tool I kept on my phone. It came back as expected. VOIP. Untraceable. Likely a disposable number generated 5 minutes ago. I looked at the photo again. Inspection res. Inspection resolution? I memorized the date. October 14th, 2014. Madeline? Elena asked, her voice trembling. Is everything okay? I looked up at her. I slid the phone back into my pocket. I did not show her the fear she expected. I did not show her the confusion. I showed her the mask. Everything is fine, I said. It is just a work notification. Work? Elena frowned. I thought you said things were slow. I smiled. A tight, professional expression. They are, but sometimes people get desperate. I walked back into the dining room. Grant was in the middle of a story about a golf game he had won 3 years ago. He did not look up when I sat down. I finished my meal. I nodded at the right times. I let him insult my car again. I let him compare me to Julian again. I watched him drink 3 more scotches. I watched the way his hands shook slightly when he set the glass down. He was afraid. The text message said he buried something. Looking at him now, stripping away the bluster and the expensive suit, I saw a man standing on a grave, terrified that the dirt was shifting. At 8 o'clock, I stood up. I have to go. Dad, I said. Early morning, Grant waved a hand. Dismissive. Go. Then, go back to your little life. I walked out. I did not hug him. I did not hug Elena. I nodded to Julian, who looked relieved that the lightning rod was leaving. I got into my car and drove. I drove in silence. No radio. Just the sound of the tires and the wind. I did not drive to a country club. I drove to the east side of the city, to a neighborhood of brick walk-ups and cracked sidewalks. My apartment building was nondescript, the kind of place you pass 1,000 times and never notice. I parked on the street and walked up the 3 flights of stairs. I unlocked my door with 3 distinct keys. Inside, the apartment was sparse. There were no family photos, no clutter, just clean lines, neutral colors, and books, walls of books on psychology, negotiation, structural engineering, and corporate law. I locked the door behind me and engaged the deadbolt. I walked into the bedroom and knelt beside the nightstand. I reached underneath and felt for the small latch. A hidden compartment clicked open. Inside was a metal lockbox. I keyed in the code. The lid popped open. Inside lay the truth of my life. There were passports with different names. There were certifications from crisis management institutes, negotiation workshops, and tactical driving schools. There were contracts from private security firms and anonymous consulting groups. And there was a phone, a sleek, black smartphone with no case, labeled with a piece of tape that said, Mara. I took the phone out. It was fully charged. I always kept it charged. I placed my personal phone, the one with the text message from the unknown number, on the desk. I would deal with the threat to my father later. Right now, I had to shift gears. The black phone rang. It was a jarring sound in the quiet apartment, a specific ringtone I had assigned to my handler at the firm. I picked it up. I did not say hello. This is Mara, I said. The voice on the other end was clipped, professional. It was David, a senior partner at the crisis firm I contracted for. We have a situation, David said, code yellow escalating to red. Location? I asked, already moving to my closet, swapping my blazer for a heavier jacket, pulling on boots that allowed for running. North suburbs, David said. St. Jude's Medical Center. We have a distraught individual in the lobby. He is threatening self-harm. He claims to have an explosive, though security has not confirmed it. Police are setting up a perimeter, but the hospital board wants us in there first. They want a quiet resolution before the news vans set up camp. St. Jude's. That was 20 minutes from my father's house. It was the hospital where the wealthy families of the suburbs went for discreet treatment. Who is the client? I asked. The hospital administration. David said, but the request for you came from the patient. I paused, one boot halfway on. The patient asked for me? He asked for the lady who talked the jumper down at the bridge last year. David said, he said he will only talk to her. That is you. Mara. I closed my eyes for a second. The bridge. That had been a cold night. A young man, high on synthetics, convinced he could fly. I had spent 4 hours on the freezing concrete, talking to him about his dog until he climbed back over the rail. I am en route, I said. ETA 20 minutes. I hung up. I looked at the mirror on the wall. The woman looking back was not Madeline Coleman, the dropout. She was not the disappointment. She was Mara. She was the person you called when the world was ending and you needed someone to hold the ceiling up. I grabbed my keys and the black phone. My father thought I was worthless because I did not have a degree on his wall. He had no idea that while he was playing at being important, I was the one actually keeping the world from breaking. I locked the apartment and ran down the stairs. The text message about my father's buried secret burned in my mind, but it would have to wait. Someone else needed saving first. And saving people was the one thing I was truly educated in. St. Jude's Medical Center was a fortress of glass and steel, glowing against the night sky like a beacon of sanitized hope. I parked my car in the emergency vehicle lane, flashing the digital permit on my phone to the security guard who stepped out to intercept me. He saw the code, nodded, and waved me through. To him, I was just another suit with clearance. He did not know I was the only thing standing between his quiet night and a national headline. I entered through the side doors, bypassing the main waiting area. The air inside was cold, smelling of antiseptic and stale coffee. David, my handler, had briefed me on the way over. The subject was named Elias, 42 years old, recently widowed. I unbuttoned the cuffs of my shirt and rolled them up. It was a calculated move. It showed I was unarmed. It showed I was working, but not threatening. I took a deep breath, engaging the diaphragm, slowing my heart rate until I felt the familiar cool detachment wash over me. Cut the strobes outside, I said to Miller, and tell your men to holster their weapons. If he sees a gun, he will panic. Miller hesitated, then signaled his team. The hands dropped away from the belts. I walked past the police line. I moved slowly, my hands open and visible at my sides. I did not look at the scalpel. I looked at Elias's eyes. They were wide, darting around the room, seeing threats in the shadows. Elias. I said. My voice was projected but soft, pitched to carry without sounding aggressive. My name is Mara. I am the one you asked for. Elias flinched, his grip on the scalpel tightening. A bead of blood appeared where the metal bit into his skin. Stay back, he shouted. Do not come any closer. I stopped instantly. I was 15 feet away, close enough to rush him if I had to, far enough to make him feel safe. I am stopping right here. Elias, I said, planting my feet. See? I am not moving. I am just here to listen. You asked for the lady from the bridge. That is me. He squinted at me, tears streaming down his face. He looked exhausted, the kind of soul-deep weariness that comes from fighting a war no one else can see. You are her? He asked, his voice cracking. I am. I said, I am the one who listens. Tell me what is happening today. Elias, it is too much. He sobbed, his body shaking so hard I feared he would cut himself by accident. They said I owe them $6,000. I do not have it. My wife died in this hospital 3 months ago. They took her. And now they want to take everything else. I cannot do it anymore. I felt a pang of sympathy, but I boxed it away. Sympathy was useless here. Empathy was the tool. But look at me, Elias. Look at my eyes. I am not going to let them hurt you. I held his gaze. It was a contest of wills. I had to pour enough stability into the space between us to anchor him. I had to be the rock he could grab onto in the middle of his ocean. Drop the scalpel. Elias, I said softly, just let it fall. It is heavy. You do not need to carry it anymore. For a long moment, the only sound in the atrium was the hum of the HVAC system. Then, Elias's hand opened. The scalpel clattered to the tile floor. I moved instantly, not with violence, but with speed. I stepped in and kicked the scalpel away, then wrapped my arms around Elias in a loose embrace before he could collapse. He sagged against me, sobbing into my shoulder. I signaled the medics. They rushed in, low and quiet. I stayed with him while they checked his vitals, keeping a hand on his shoulder until they loaded him onto the gurney. Thank you, he whispered as they wheeled him away. I watched him go. Miller walked up to me, shaking his head. Ice water in your veins, Mara, Miller said. Good work. I nodded, grabbing my jacket. My hands were steady, but my mind was already replaying the tape, looking for errors. Make sure he gets a psychiatric consult, not just a holding cell. I told Miller, and send the billing dispute to my office. I will handle it. Miller looked at me, surprised. You are going to pay his bill? I pulled on my jacket. I am going to make sure the hospital writes it off. They have an endowment for this. They just do not tell people about it. I walked out of the atrium, the adrenaline crash hitting me as I reached the cool night air. I needed a cigarette, even though I had quit 5 years ago. Instead, I reached for my water bottle. As I crossed the parking lot toward my car, a voice called out from the shadows near the entrance ramp. Madeline? Madeline Coleman? I froze. The name was a shock. Here, I was Mara. Madeline Coleman was a ghost. I turned slowly. Standing near a luxury SUV was a woman in scrubs, holding a tablet. She looked familiar. The sharp nose, the intelligent eyes. It took me a second to place her. Rebecca Sterling. We had been in the same doctoral cohort at the university. She had been the one who always asked for extra credit. Rebecca, I said, my voice shifting. I dropped the commanding tone of Mara and adopted the flatter, more passive tone of Madeline. It is you, Rebecca exclaimed, walking over. Her eyes scanned me, taking in the utilitarian clothes, the lack of jewelry. Oh my God, I have not seen you in, what, 8 years? Since you left. She had almost said since the incident. I saw the correction happen in real time. It has been a long time, I said politely. You are working here? Chief of Psychiatry, she said, not bothering to hide the pride. I just finished my rounds. I saw the commotion in the lobby. Was that you? Talking to the patient? I shrugged. I was just passing through. Wrong place, right time. Rebecca looked skeptical. You look like a pro. Madeline, I saw you from the balcony, the way you handled him. That was clinical. She paused, her eyes narrowing slightly. You know, there was a rumor about you. After you dropped out, I kept my face blank. Oh? Yeah. People said you vanished after that investigation. The ethics board thing. No one ever knew the details. Just that you were the star pupil one day. And then you were erased the next. Professor Holloway never spoke your name again. The name Holloway hit me like a physical blow. He was the mentor who had guided me, praised me, and then quietly opened the door for my exit when I saw something I was not supposed to see. It was not an investigation. Rebecca. I lied smoothly. It was a personal matter. Family reasons. You know how it is. Rebecca nodded. But I could tell she did not believe me. She was a psychiatrist. After all, she read lies for a living. Right, family. Well, whatever you are doing now, you clearly have not lost your touch. That was impressive work. Thanks, I said, turning toward my car. Good to see you. Rebecca. I got into my car and locked the doors. I sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. The past was leaking into the present. First the text message about my father, now Rebecca bringing up Holloway and the investigation. The wall I had built between Madeline the disappointment and Mara the expert was starting to crack. I drove home, the city lights blurring into streaks of neon. I needed sleep, but when I got back to my apartment, the black phone was blinking again. I picked it up. It was a secure email from the firm. Subject: High Priority / Risk Observation / Coleman Gala. I stared at the screen. The universe, it seemed to me, had a sick sense of humor. The email detailed a new contract. The organizers of the annual Children's Charity Gala, the same one my father was speaking at, had hired my firm. Several high-profile donors and executives had received anonymous threats, not physical threats, but reputational ones. Vague warnings about a financial leak that would expose the rot at the foundation. The firm wanted a risk observer on the ground, someone to blend in, watch the crowd, and identify the source of any disturbance. They wanted someone who knew the players but could remain invisible. They wanted me. I could have refused. I could have told David that the conflict of interest was too high. But the text message from the burner phone was still burning a hole in my mind. If he is your father, you should know what he buried. The threats to the gala were connected to the text. I was sure of it. Someone was hunting Grant Coleman, and if I did not find out who, I would be collateral damage. I typed a reply. Accepted. 2 nights later, I stood in the ballroom of the Grand Meridian Hotel. I was not wearing my usual functional suits. I was wearing a black evening gown, elegant but simple, bought off the rack at a department store. It was cut to blend in, not to stand out. I wore my hair down, softening my features. I looked like a donor's wife, or perhaps a junior executive's +1. I had an earpiece in my left ear. Covered by my hair, it connected me to the venue's security feed and my team outside. The room was a sea of tuxedos and designer silk. The air smelled of expensive perfume and roast beef. Waiters with white gloves moved through the crowd like ghosts, offering champagne and hors d'oeuvres. I stood near a pillar, nursing a glass of sparkling water. I scanned the room. I saw the mayor. I saw the CEO of the hospital, and in the center of it all, holding court under the crystal chandelier, was my father. Grant Coleman looked magnificent. He was wearing a custom tuxedo that fit his broad shoulders perfectly. His silver hair was coiffed, his smile dazzling. He was laughing at something Arthur Pendon was saying, his hand resting casually on Arthur's shoulder. It was the picture of paternal warmth and power. I moved closer, drifting through the crowd, careful to stay out of his direct line of sight. I tell you, Arthur, Grant was saying, his voice carrying over the din, it is all about resilience. You have to build a foundation that can withstand the storms. Arthur nodded enthusiastically. You have certainly done that. Grant, your family must be so proud. Is your daughter here tonight? Grant's smile faltered for a microsecond. A glitch in the program. Before returning at full wattage. Madeline. No, she could not make it. She is finding herself. You know how millennials are. She prefers a quieter life. The intellectual pressure of these events is a bit much for her. He chuckled, a sound that invited Arthur to conspire with him in pitying his inadequate child. Arthur laughed politely. Well, not everyone is cut out for the arena. Grant, exactly, Grant said, taking a sip of his drink. Some people are destined to watch from the sidelines. It is better that way. She would only be uncomfortable here. I felt a cold, hard stone form in my stomach, the intellectual pressure. He was mocking my intelligence to a man who had never met me. He was rewriting my history to preserve his own status. If I was weak, his strength seemed even greater by comparison. I tapped my earpiece. Mara to control. Main floor is stable. VIPs are congregating near the stage. No sign of the agitator. Copy that. Mara. The voice in my ear crackled. Keep eyes on the exits. We have a report of a disturbance at the valet, but it might be nothing. I continued my circuit of the room. I saw my stepmother, Elena, sitting at table 4. She looked terrified. Her smile was plastered on, brittle and tight. She was scanning the room, her eyes darting nervously. She knew something was wrong. Suddenly, the energy in the room shifted. It was subtle at first, a ripple of conversation dying out near the entrance, heads turning, a low murmur spreading like a wave. I turned to look. A woman was marching across the ballroom floor. She was dressed in a silver gown that had probably cost $10,000, but her hair was slightly disheveled, and her face was flushed with rage. I recognized her. It was Mrs. Sterling, the wife of one of the city's biggest real estate developers. She was not holding a drink. She was holding a thick packet of papers. Grant did not see her coming. He was too busy accepting a compliment from the mayor. Grant Coleman! Mrs. Sterling's voice was a shriek that cut through the polite chatter like a knife. Grant turned, his smile freezing in place. "Joyce?" he said, confused. "Joyce, what is— Do not you speak to me!" she screamed. She reached him and slammed the papers against his chest. They scattered across the floor, white sheets fanning out over the polished wood. "You are a thief!" she yelled. "We trusted you. The hospital wing. Where did the money go? Grant, where did it go?" The room went deathly silent. Even the string quartet in the corner stopped playing. Grant looked at the papers on the floor. I saw his face pale. He recognized them. "Joyce, you are making a scene," Grant said, his voice dropping to a hiss. "This is neither the time nor the place. You are hysterical." "Hysterical?" She laughed, a wild, jagged sound. "My husband is facing an audit because of you. Look at them. Look at the shell accounts. You bribed the inspectors. You falsified the audits." She pointed a shaking finger at him. "You are a fraud, Grant. A cheap, lying fraud." Flashbulbs started popping. The local press, who had been relegated to the back of the room, were now rushing forward, sensing blood in the water. Phones were raised, recording every second. Grant's mask slipped. The charming patriarch vanished, replaced by the bully I knew from the dinner table. He stepped forward, invading her personal space. "Security!" he barked. "Get this woman out of here. She is drunk." He reached out to grab her arm, to physically steer her away. Mrs. Sterling flinched, raising her hand as if to strike him. That was the tipping point. If Grant touched her, or if she slapped him, the video would go viral within minutes. It would be assault. It would be the end. I moved. I did not run. Running causes panic. I power walked, cutting through the crowd with fluid precision. I reached them just as Grant's hand was closing around her wrist. I stepped between them, my back to my father, facing Mrs. Sterling. I used my body as a shield, breaking their line of sight. "Mrs. Sterling," I said, my voice low and authoritative. "Look at me." She blinked, startled by my sudden appearance. "Who are you?" she demanded. "I am security." I lied calmly. "I need you to step back." "You have made your point. The cameras have seen the papers. If you hit him, you lose the high ground. Do you understand?" She looked at me, breathing hard. The logic penetrated her rage. She lowered her hand. "He stole from us," she whispered. "I know," I said, "and the lawyers will handle it. But right now, you need to walk away before you get arrested." I signaled to two uniformed security guards who had finally frozen nearby. Unsure of what to do. "Escort Mrs. Sterling to her car," I ordered, gently. They nodded and moved in, guiding her away. She went willingly, her energy spent. I turned to face my father. He was staring at me. His face was a mixture of shock and fury. He did not see a savior. He saw his daughter interfering in his business. "What do you think you are doing?" he hissed. "Get away from me. I had it under control. You were about to assault a donor on camera." "Dad," I said quietly, my voice devoid of emotion, "I just saved you a lawsuit." He looked around. The crowd was staring. The cameras were still rolling. He realized he was on stage. He straightened his tie, forced a laugh, and turned to the crowd. "Apologies, everyone," he shouted, spreading his arms. "It seems some people have had a bit too much to drink tonight. Please, enjoy the dinner." The band started playing again, hesitant at first, then louder. The chatter resumed, but the tone had changed. It was not admiration anymore, it was gossip. I stepped back, melting into the shadows. I watched the waiters scurrying to pick up the papers from the floor. I saw Grant snatch one from a waiter's hand and stuff it into his pocket. Then, my phone buzzed. And not just mine, all around the room, phones lit up. A chorus of chimes, beeps, and vibrations rippled through the ballroom. It was a wave of sound. I pulled out my black phone, a new email. From the auditor. Subject: The first brick. I opened it. It was a blast email sent to every registered guest at the gala. The body of the email was simple. Grant Coleman claims to build foundations. Ask him about the inspection resolution of 2014. Ask him who signed the safety checks for the West Side medical expansion. The scandal tonight is just the tip of the iceberg. The truth is in the dirt. Attached was a PDF. I opened it. It was the same ledger page I had received via text. But this time, it was clear, and there was more. There were emails between Grant and a fictional construction firm, discussing expediting fees to bypass safety protocols. I looked up. Grant was checking his phone. I saw the color drain from his face completely. He looked like a man who had been shot. He looked up, his eyes scanning the room wildly. He was looking for the enemy. He was looking for the person who knew his secrets. His eyes landed on me. For a second, I saw raw fear in his gaze. He looked at me not as his daughter, but as a witness. I realized then that this was not just a financial attack. The person doing this knew exactly when to strike. They knew Grant's ego. They knew he would dismiss Mrs. Sterling as drunk. They waited until he had handled the first wave before hitting him with the second. They wanted him to feel safe before they pulled the rug out. This was psychological warfare. This was the work of someone who understood leverage, timing, and the specific architecture of Grant Coleman's pride. And as I stood there, watching my father crumble in slow motion, I realized something else. The tactics were familiar. The patience, the escalation, the use of public humiliation to force a private collapse. It felt like something I would do. I looked at the email again. The truth is in the dirt. I needed to find who was behind this. Not to save my father. He deserved the reckoning. But because whoever it was, they were playing a game that I had been training for my entire life. And I had a terrible suspicion that I was not just a spectator in this. I was a piece on the board. I tapped my earpiece. Mara to control. We have a mass data breach. The gala is compromised. I am initiating an exit strategy for the target. I moved toward my father, not to comfort him, but to contain the blast radius. The morning after the gala, the silence in my apartment felt heavy, like a physical weight pressing against the windows. I sat at my small, functional desk, a cup of black coffee cooling near my elbow, on my screen. The cursor blinked in the search bar of the county clerk's public records database. I was not hacking. That is a myth sold by movies. The idea that truth is always hidden behind complex encryption and firewalls. In my experience, the most damaging secrets are usually hidden in plain sight, buried in the boredom of bureaucracy. They are tucked into footnotes on page 42 of a quarterly filing or obscured by vague language in a municipal permit. I was looking for the inspection resolution of 2014. The anonymous email from the gala had given me the date and the name. My father's reaction had given me the confirmation that it mattered. I typed in the search parameters: Coleman Development Group, Safety Citations, Civil Settlements, 2014. The database churned for a moment before spitting out a list of PDFs. Most were routine: zoning variances, noise complaints. But there, buried in October of that year, was a scanned document titled Civil Agreement and Release of Liability. I opened it. It was a settlement regarding an incident at the West Side medical expansion, a project my father had bragged about for years. The official narrative was that the project was a triumph of modern engineering. The document told a different story. On September 12, 2014, A temporary scaffolding structure had collapsed on the south side of the site. 3 workers were injured. The document listed their names: Luis Garcia, Marcus Thorne, David Wu. The injuries were not fatal, but they were life-altering. Crushed vertebrae, shattered knees. The settlement amount was substantial, $300,000 per person, but it came with a strict non-disclosure agreement. The workers were paid to stay silent, but that was not the smoking gun. Construction accidents happen. Settlements happen. The smoking gun was the date of the safety inspection that cleared the site to reopen. It was dated September 14th, 2 days after the collapse. I pulled up the inspector's report from a different archive. The inspector had signed off on the site's stability, citing minor debris, but no structural compromise. Then I cross-referenced the inspector's name with the donor list for the Heritage Civic Trust, a local philanthropic organization my father was heavily involved with. There it was. 1 week after the inspection was signed, a donation of $50,000 was made to the inspector's favorite charity, a small youth league in his district, by an anonymous donor routed through the Heritage Civic Trust. It was a kickback, a bribe laundered through a nonprofit to look like community support. My father had not just cut corners, he had paid a public official to look the other way while men were in the hospital, ensuring his project stayed on schedule. He had traded their spines for his deadline. I sat back in my chair. The coffee was cold. I drank it anyway. My phone buzzed. It was not the black phone this time. It was my personal line. Come home. The text from Elena read, "Now." The drive to the suburbs felt longer than usual. The trees lining the roads were turning the color of dried blood, shedding their leaves in anticipation of winter. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked different. The carefully manicured lawn seemed less like a showpiece and more like a fortress under siege. I found Grant in his study. The curtains were drawn, blocking out the afternoon sun. He was wearing a bathrobe, which was terrifying in its own right. Grant Coleman never wore a bathrobe past 7 in the morning. He was a man who armored himself in Italian wool before he faced the world. He was pacing the length of the Persian rug, a tumbler of scotch in his hand. He looked like a caged lion, pacing, turning, pacing, turning. "Dad," I said from the doorway. He stopped and looked at me. His eyes were bloodshot. "They are trying to crucify me." "Madeline," he said. His voice was hoarse. "Who?" I asked, stepping into the room. "Competitors," he spat. "Jealous. Petty little men who never had the guts to build anything real. They see a man at the top, and they want to tear him down. It is the American way." I closed the door behind me. I saw the email. "Dad, I saw the attachment. The ledger page from the West Side Project." He waved his hand dismissively, sloshing amber liquid onto the rug. "Paperwork," he said. "It is just paperwork. You do not understand how this industry works. Madeline, you sit in your little apartment reading books, but out here, in the real world, you have to grease the wheels. Everyone does it." I walked over to the desk. I needed to see his face when I asked the next question. "Did you pay the inspector to ignore the collapse?" I asked. He slammed his glass down on the desk. "I paid for efficiency," he shouted. "Those men were compensated. I took care of them. They signed the papers. They signed because they were hurt, and they needed the money." I said calmly, "That is not taking care of them. That is buying their silence." He laughed, a bitter, ugly sound. "Do not lecture me on ethics, Madeline. You? The girl who could not even finish a degree? You walked away when things got hard. I stayed. I finished the job. That hospital wing has saved thousands of lives. Does that not count? Does the result not matter?" He was pivoting, just like he always did. If he could not win on the facts, he would attack the character of the accuser. "This is not about me," I said. "It is about who sent that email. They have the ledger. Dad, that means they were inside, or they know someone who was—" "I told you," he snapped. "It is a competitor. Probably Vance Construction. They have been after that municipal contract for years. I watched him. His hands were shaking. He was looking at the door. At the window. Anywhere but at me. He was lying. Not about the bribe. He had practically admitted that. But about who he thought the leaker was. He did not think it was Vance Construction. He knew it was something more personal. I am going to talk to the lawyers. I said, "No!" he shouted. Too quickly. No lawyers yet. We handle this in the family. We do not let strangers in until we have a strategy. He was terrified of discovery, not just of the crime, but of the weakness. I walked out of the study, leaving him to his scotch and his shadows. I found Elena in the sunroom at the back of the house. She was repotting an orchid, her hands buried in dark, moist soil. She did not look up when I entered. "He has been drinking since 6 this morning," she said softly. I leaned against the doorframe. "He thinks it is a business rival." Elena stopped working. She dusted her hands off on her apron, leaving streaks of dirt on the white linen. "He does not think that, Maddie. He is just saying that to you." She turned to face me. Her face was pale, the makeup unable to hide the dark circles under her eyes. "He has been getting letters for weeks." She whispered, "Letters?" I asked. "Typed? On plain paper, no return address. They come to the house, not the office." "What do they say?" She hesitated, looking toward the hallway to make sure Grant was not listening. "They say things like, 'We know what you built on broken bones, and the foundation is rotting.' He burns them in the fireplace. He forbade me to call the police. He said it would look weak. He said he could handle it." I felt a chill run down my spine. "The foundation is rotting." That was a specific phrase. It echoed the email. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. She looked at me with a sad, weary smile. "Because he told me not to, and because we did not think you could do anything. We thought you were just—" She trailed off. "Just Madeline." I finished for her. She nodded. "I am sorry, Maddie. But last night at the gala, the way you moved, the way you handled Mrs. Sterling, I have never seen you like that. Who are you? Really?" I walked over and put a hand on her shoulder. It was the first time I had touched her with genuine affection in years. "I am the person who is going to fix this, Elena. But I need you to do something for me. If another letter comes, do not let him burn it. Take a picture. Send it to me. Can you do that?" She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "Yes, I can do that." I left the house with a sense of urgency. The timeline had shifted. This wasn't a sudden attack. It was a siege that had been going on for a month. My next stop was a coffee shop downtown. Neutral ground. I had a meeting with Marcus, the legal liaison for my consulting firm. Marcus was a sharp, cynical man who wore three-piece suits and trusted no one. He was already waiting for me at a back table. Scrolling through his tablet, "You are playing with fire. Mara," he said without preamble as I sat down. "I prefer Madeline today." I said. He looked up, raising an eyebrow. "Fine, Madeline. The partners are nervous. You are the risk observer on a contract where the primary target is your father. That is a conflict of interest so big you could see it from space. I disclosed the relationship." I said, "You disclosed it after you took the gig." He countered. I leaned in. "Marcus, listen to me. This isn't just a corporate leak. Someone is dismantling him psychologically. They are using internal documents from 12 years ago. They have access to his home address. This is a vendetta." "So?" Marcus said, taking a sip of his espresso. "Let him fall. The man is a liability. Our job is to protect the gala organizers, not Grant Coleman. If he goes down for bribery, that is his problem. We just need to make sure the gala doesn't get sued." "I cannot just watch." I said, "Why? Because he is your daddy?" Marcus sneered. "From what I hear, he treats you like a servant. Because if I don't stop it," I said, ignoring the jab, "the collateral damage is going to be massive. Innocent people are going to get hurt. The employees at his company, the people on those construction sites. The leaker doesn't care who they burn." Marcus studied my face for a long moment. He saw the resolve there. He knew I was the best crisis manager they had. "Fine," he said, sighing. "But you are officially off the clock for the investigation part. If you get caught breaking and entering, the firm doesn't know you. You are a private citizen settling a family dispute. That is all I need." I said. "One more thing," Marcus said, sliding a folder across the table. We ran a trace on the IP address that sent the email blast. It bounced through a dozen servers, but the origin point wasn't a hacker's basement. "Where was it?" I asked. Opening the folder, it was a public library terminal. He said, "In the University District." I stared at the paper. The University District. That evening, I received a call on my personal phone. The number was blocked. "Madeline Coleman?" a female voice asked. Clear, articulate, professional. Speaking. "My name is Sloane Harper. I am a journalist with the City Chronicle." I gripped the phone tighter. "If you are looking for a quote about my father, I have nothing to say." "I am not looking for a quote," Sloane said. "I am looking for a confirmation. Can we meet? I do not talk to the press." "Ms. Harper, I know who you are." "Madeline," she said, or rather, "I know who you were. I know why you left the doctoral program at Kipling University." I froze. That part of my life was a sealed box. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice dropping. "I want to stop a monster," she said. "And I don't mean your father. He is just a symptom. I am talking about the disease. Meet me at the university library. Reference section. 1 hour." She hung up. I went. The library was a cathedral of silence. Rows of books stretched up to the vaulted ceiling. I found Sloane Harper at a heavy oak table in the back. She was younger than I expected, maybe 28, with sharp features and eyes that missed nothing. She had a laptop open and a stack of files next to her. "You came," she said, not smiling. "You mentioned Kipling." I said, sitting down opposite her. Sloane turned her laptop around. On the screen was a relationship map. Names, lines, circles. "I have been tracking the Heritage Civic Trust for 2 years," she said. "They present themselves as a charity. They fund parks, libraries, hospitals, but that is just the front." She tapped a name on the screen. "They are a reputation laundry service." She continued, "Powerful men like your father, donate to the trust. The trust then funds civic projects that make those men look like saints. But the trust also demands favors. They control zoning boards. They influence safety inspections." I looked at the map. I saw my father's name. I saw Arthur Pendon's name. And then I saw another name. Professor Samuel Halloway. My stomach turned over. "Why is Halloway on this map?" I asked. Sloane looked at me with sympathy. "The Heritage Civic Trust was the primary donor for the behavioral psychology department at Kipling," she said. "They funded the new research wing, the wing that Halloway runs." I felt the blood drain from my face. 8 years ago, I was Halloway's research assistant. I was the star pupil. We were conducting a study on the psychological impacts of displacement in low-income neighborhoods. It was groundbreaking work, but then I found the data discrepancies. The numbers had been massaged. The negative impacts were being minimized to support a developer's proposal for a new luxury complex. A developer funded by the Heritage Civic Trust. I had gone to Halloway. I had shown him the proof. I thought he would be outraged. Instead, he had looked sad. He told me I was mistaken. He told me to drop it. When I refused, the accusations started. Plagiarism, ethical misconduct, vague rumors that destroyed my credibility. I was given a choice: leave quietly or be expelled publicly. I left. I thought Halloway had betrayed me to save his own reputation. But looking at Sloane's map, I realized it was bigger than Halloway. The trust threatened to pull the funding. I whispered. Sloane nodded. If the study showed the development was harmful, the trust would have cut the department off. Halloway sacrificed you to save the funding, to save the program. I sat there, the pieces clicking into place. The same mechanism that had covered up my father's construction accident had also buried my academic career. It was the same machine, the leak about your father. Sloane said, "It is not just about him. Whoever is doing this is attacking the entire network of the trust. They are pulling on a thread that is going to unravel everything." "Who is it?" I asked. "I don't know," Sloane admitted. but they have access to the Trust's internal archives, and they are angry. I stood up. I needed to see him. Holloway? Sloane asked. Yes. Be careful. Madeline? He is a coward, and cowards are dangerous when they are cornered. I drove to the university. It was late, but I knew Holloway would be there. He lived in his office. I found him in the new wing, the wing built with blood money. He was older, grayer, sitting behind a desk cluttered with papers. He looked up when I entered. He squinted, adjusting his glasses. Madeline? He asked, his voice trembling slightly. Hello, Professor, I said. He stood up, looking nervous. I heard about your father. The news is everywhere. I am so sorry. Are you? I asked, walking further into the room. Or are you just worried that his name is connected to the Trust? And the Trust is connected to you? He sank back into his chair. You have to understand. Madeline, he said, his voice pleading. They were going to shut us down. The research, the students. It all would have ended. So you traded me. I said, you traded the truth for a building. I did what I had to do. He said weakly, it was for the greater good. There is no greater good built on a lie. Professor, I said. I looked around the office, the accolades on the wall, the framed degree. It all looked cheap to me now. I did not come here for an apology. I said, I came here to tell you that it is over. The secrets are coming out. My father is just the first domino. You are next. Holloway looked at me, and I saw a flash of something in his eyes. Not fear, recognition. You think I don't know that? He whispered. Why do you think I haven't slept in weeks? He opened a drawer and pulled out a piece of paper. He slid it across the desk. It was a photocopy of a ledger page, the same one my father had received. You got one too, I said. Everyone did. Holloway said, everyone who took money from the Trust. I looked at the paper, and then I saw it. In the margins of the photocopy, there was a faint, handwritten note. It was barely visible, like an impression left by a pen pressing too hard on the previous page. For the ones we failed, I recognized the handwriting. I had seen it 1,000 times. On lecture notes, on grading papers, on the margins of my own thesis drafts. It was not Holloway's handwriting. It was the handwriting of a woman I had known in the program, a quiet, brilliant student who had dropped out a year after I did, a woman who had looked up to me, a woman I had tried to mentor, but whom I had left behind when I fled. Sarah Jenkins. I looked at Holloway. Where is Sarah Jenkins? I asked. Holloway went pale. Sarah? She works for the Trust now. She is their archivist. The air left the room. Sarah was the leaker, the girl who had idolized me, the girl who had seen what happened to me and stayed. She had infiltrated the belly of the beast. She had spent years earning their trust, gathering their secrets, waiting for the moment to burn it all down, and she had started with my father because she knew it would bring me back. She wasn't just exposing the corruption, she was calling me home. I looked at Holloway one last time. You better get a lawyer. Samuel, I said. I turned and walked out. I walked out into the cool night air of the campus. I wasn't angry. I wasn't seeking revenge against Holloway or my father. I felt a strange, crystalline clarity. Grant Coleman had called me uneducated. He had called me worthless. But the person bringing down his empire was a student of the very ethics he mocked. And the only person who could stop the total destruction of innocent lives was me, the dropout. I took out my burner phone. I dialed a number I hadn't used in 8 years. It rang 3 times. Hello? A voice answered. Tentative. Hopeful. Hello. Sarah. I said, It is Madeline. We need to talk. The fall of a titan does not happen all at once. It happens in a series of small, suffocating silences followed by frantic, meaningless noise. 3 days after the gala, the noise in the Coleman household was deafening. It was the sound of a legacy being dismantled, one phone call at a time. I sat in the kitchen, nursing a cup of tea, listening to my father in the next room. He was shouting at his banker. I am Grant Coleman, he bellowed, his voice cracking with a desperation I had never heard before. "You cannot freeze my operating accounts based on an anonymous email. I have been with your bank for 30 years. There was a pause, a silence, where the banker on the other end was likely reciting federal compliance statutes regarding money laundering and fraud investigations. "This is ridiculous!" Grant screamed, and I heard the receiver slam against the desk. I watched the steam rise from my tea. The dismantling had been surgical. First, the partners at the development firm had requested emergency leaves of absence. Then, the suppliers for the current projects had demanded upfront payment, citing risk assessment. And this morning, the final blow. The organizers of the State Civic Summit had called to cancel his keynote speech. They claimed it was a scheduling conflict. Everyone knew it was a quarantine. Grant stormed into the kitchen. He looked like a man who had not slept in 48 hours. His shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, his hair disheveled. The polished veneer of the country club patriarch was gone, replaced by something feral. He saw me sitting there, calm and still, and his eyes narrowed. To him. My stillness was an accusation. "Look at you," he spat, grabbing a bottle of water from the fridge and cracking it open with violent force. "Just sitting there. The world is burning down around us, and you are drinking tea." I set the cup down gently. "I am not just sitting. Dad, I am monitoring the news cycle. The story has moved from the gossip columns to the financial pages. We need a statement." He laughed. A harsh, barking sound. "We? There is no we. Madeline, there is me, building an empire. And there is you, watching it. That is all you have ever done, watched. You are a spectator to real life." The insult landed with precision. He knew exactly where to hit. He was attacking the very survival mechanism I had developed to endure him. "I am trying to help you," I said, keeping my voice level. "Help me?" He sneered, leaning over the island, invading my space. "How? What qualifications do you have?" "You have a half-finished degree and a resume full of gaps. You are unqualified to run a lemonade stand, let alone a crisis like this." He took a swig of water, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "But since you are here," he continued, his voice dropping to a demanding growl, "you can be useful. I need you to sign a statement." He pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket and slid it across the marble counter. "What is this?" I asked, not touching it. "It is a character affidavit," he said. "It says you were aware of the West Side funds. It says you oversaw the charitable distribution. It frames the payments as discretionary aid." I looked at the paper. He wanted me to take the fall, or at least, he wanted me to muddy the waters enough to buy him time. He wanted to use my name, the name he called worthless, to shield his own. "I will not sign that," I said. He blinked, as if the furniture had suddenly spoken back to him. "Excuse me? I will not sign it. Dad, it is a lie. I was not there. And those payments were not aid. They were bribes." His face turned a dangerous shade of red. "I am your father," he shouted, slamming his hand on the counter. "I put a roof over your head. I paid for that tuition you wasted. You owe me this. I owe you the truth." I said, standing up, "I will help you prevent harm. I will help you navigate the legal fallout. I will make sure Mom is protected. But I will not lie for you, and I will not intimidate anyone into silence." He stared at me, his chest heaving. For a moment, I thought he might strike me. But then, his expression shifted into something colder. Disgust. "Get out," he whispered. "If you are not loyal, you are nothing. You are a traitor." I picked up my phone. "I am not a traitor. Dad, I am the only person in this room who is not lying to you." I walked out of the kitchen, his rage vibrating in the air behind me. I went to the guest room where I had been staying, locking the door. My hands were shaking, just a little. The old programming runs deep, but I breathed through it. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. My computer chimed. A new email. It was not from my firm. It was from the anonymous sender. The subject line was simple. Ultimatum. I opened it. The message was short. Public confession or public ruin. You have 24 hours to admit to the board what you did to the inspection protocols. If you do not, we release the rest. Attached was a video file. I clicked play. The footage was grainy, low resolution, likely taken from a hidden camera in a lapel or a briefcase. It was dated 8 years ago. The setting was a private dining room. I recognized the wallpaper. It was the Oak Room, a club my father favored. In the video, Grant was sitting at a table with 2 other men. One was Arthur Pendon. The other was a man I did not recognize, a heavy-set man in a cheap suit. The audio was muddy, but I could make out the words, "We cannot have a delay." "Grant," the heavy-set man said, "the investors will walk. There will be no delay." Grant's voice cut in, sharp and arrogant. "The inspector understands the arrangement. He has a family. He understands legacy." "And if he talks?" Arthur Pendon asked, looking nervous. Grant laughed. It was the same laugh I had heard in the kitchen. Nobody talks when their mouth is full. "Arthur, we feed him. He eats. The building goes up. Everyone wins." The video cut to black. I stared at the screen. It was damning, but it was also vague. "He eats" could mean anything in a court of law. It wasn't a smoking gun, but in the court of public opinion, it was an execution. My phone rang. It was Sloane Harper, the journalist. "You got the email?" she asked. "I am looking at it now," I said. "I ran a trace on the header." Sloane said, her voice quick with excitement. "It is not routing through the library this time. They are getting bold, or careless. It came from a private server registered to a firm called Archer Compliance Solutions. Archer Compliance." I repeated, typing the name into my search bar. "It is a boutique firm," Sloane said. "Just popped up 3 years ago. They handle ethics audits for mid-sized companies. Their website is full of stock photos and buzzwords. I found the site. It looked legitimate at a glance, but to a trained eye, it was hollow. No team bios, no physical address, just a P.O. box in the financial district. I am going to the address." I said, "I will meet you there." Sloane said. We met an hour later in front of a nondescript office building downtown. The directory listed Archer Compliance Solutions on the 4th floor. We took the elevator up. The hallway was quiet. Suite 402 was locked. Sloane looked at me. "How do we do this? Do we knock?" I looked at the lock. It was a standard commercial keypad. I noticed the wear pattern on the keys. The numbers 1, 3, 5, and 9 were slightly more worn than the others. I tried a combination. 1359, error, 9531, error, 1953, the light turned green, a birth year, 1953, my father's birth year. I pushed the door open. The office was empty. There were no employees, no phones ringing, just a single desk with a server rack humming in the corner and a filing cabinet. "It is a ghost firm," Sloane whispered, stepping inside. I walked to the desk. There was a single framed photo on it. It was a picture of a group of people at a groundbreaking ceremony. I recognized my father. I recognized Arthur Pendon. And standing in the back, holding a shovel, was a man I knew, Gerald Fincher. He was an old family friend, a man who came to every barbecue. He was currently sitting on the board of the Heritage Civic Trust. "This is Gerald's office," I said. "Why would Gerald Fincher be running a fake compliance firm that is leaking dirt on his best friend?" Sloane asked. "Because he is not just leaking on Grant." I realized, looking at the papers on the desk, he is leaking on everyone. I started sifting through the files. They were not compliance audits. They were blackmail folders. Every major player in the city was here. The mayor, the hospital CEO. Grant. Gerald wasn't a whistleblower. He was an insurance broker. He collected dirt to ensure his own safety, to ensure his position on the board. But someone had hacked Gerald. The leaker wasn't Gerald. The leaker had stolen Gerald's hoard. I picked up a file labeled Coleman. I opened it. Inside were the originals, the ledger pages, the safety reports, and something else, a document titled Witness Attestation, Board Minutes 2016. It was a record of a meeting where the board had approved the cover-up funds. It required 2 witnesses. One signature was Gerald Fincher, the other signature was Madeline Coleman. I stared at the paper. The room seemed to tilt on its axis. "That is not my signature," I whispered. Sloane looked over my shoulder. "Are you sure? It looks like—" "It is a forgery," I said, my voice shaking, "but it is a good one." I looked at the date, June 12th, 2016. I was in rehab that month. I said quietly, "Not for drugs, for exhaustion." After I left the program, I was in a facility 2 states away. I could not have signed this. I realized then the depth of the betrayal. Grant had not just ignored me. He had used my absence. He needed a witness who was legally an adult, but completely checked out. He needed someone who would never read the minutes, never attend the meetings, and never ask questions. He had forged my name to validate his crimes. He had made me an accomplice without my knowledge. He counted on my failure to keep me silent. He bet on my shame. I felt a cold rage settle in my chest. It was different from the anger I had felt before. This was clarifying. It burned away the last remnants of the daughter who wanted to please him. "We have to go," I said, closing the file and tucking it into my bag. "Where?" Sloane asked. "To see Gerald," I said. "We found Gerald Fincher at his club. The very one from the video. He was sitting alone in the library, staring at a scotch he wasn't drinking. He looked up when I walked in. He looked old, defeated. 'Madeline,' he said, not seeming surprised. I wondered when you would figure it out." "Did you write it?" I asked, throwing the file onto the table. "Did you sign my name?" Gerald sighed. He picked up his glass. "Your father signed it. Madeline. I just witnessed it." "Why?" I asked. "Why use me?" "Because you were the perfect ghost," Gerald said softly. "You were gone." "You were the disappointment," Grant said. "Who is going to believe her? She is unstable. She is uneducated. He said your name was the safest place to hide the lie." I felt the sting of tears, but I refused to let them fall. "Who has access to your server?" "Gerald?" I asked. "Who stole the files?" He laughed bitterly. "I do not know. I hired a consultant a year ago to digitize the archives. Quiet girl, very efficient, said she wanted to learn about civic management." "Sarah," I said. He nodded. "I think that was her name. She had a grudge." "Madeline. I could see it in her eyes, but I was too arrogant to think she could hurt us. I thought we were untouchable." I turned to leave. "One more thing," Gerald said. "The deadline. The ultimatum. It is real. If Grant does not confess tomorrow, she is going to release everything. Not just the bribes, the detailed payout logs, the names of the families we paid off. It will destroy the foundation. It will destroy the hospital. And it will destroy me," I thought, because my name is on the witness line. I walked out of the club. Sloane was waiting in the car. It was Sarah. I said, "She stole Gerald's files. She has everything. So what do we do?" Sloane asked. "We stop the bleeding," I said. My phone rang. It was the black phone. I answered it. "Mara." It was David. His voice was grim. "I am here. We are pulling you." David said, "What? The client?" "The gala organizers. They are terminating the contract. They say the risk is too high. And honestly, Mara, your liability exposure is through the roof. We know about the document with your signature." "How?" I asked. "We have our sources." David said, "You are a person of interest in a federal fraud case now. We cannot have you operating as an agent of the firm. You are done. Turn in your phone. Burn the alias. You are on your own." The line went dead. I sat in the passenger seat of Sloane's car, holding the silent black phone. I was fired. My cover was blown. My father had framed me. The police were likely building a case file with my name on it. I looked at the phone. Mara was gone. The protector was gone. All that was left was Madeline. Sloane looked at me. "They pulled you?" she guessed. "Yes. So what now? Do you run?" I looked out the window at the city skyline. I saw the buildings my father had built. I saw the hospital where I had saved a man from suicide 3 nights ago. I thought about the uneducated girl my father mocked. I thought about the worthless daughter. "No," I said, I do not run. I opened the back of the phone and pulled out the SIM card. I snapped it in half. I am not Mara anymore. I said, and I am not the victim my father thinks I am. I turned to Sloane. Grant is going to try to spin this tomorrow. He is going to try to lie his way out of it at the board meeting. He is going to use me as a shield again. And? Sloane asked. And I'm going to be there. I said, not as his daughter, not as a consultant. I am going to be the witness he claimed I was. But this time, I am going to testify for real. You realize what that means, Sloane said. If you expose him, you expose yourself. You admit you are connected to the fraud. Even if it was forged, you will be dragged through the mud. I know. I said, but if I stay silent, innocent people get hurt. The employees at the firm, the patients at the hospital, the scapegoats Grant is planning to line up. I looked at my hands. They were steady. My father spent his whole life building a monument to himself. He used my name as a brick in that wall. Tomorrow, I'm going to pull that brick out. Drive me to the office. Sloane, I said, I have a presentation to prepare. She started the car. You are going to take him down? She asked. No. I said, I am going to tell him who I really am. And then I am going to let the truth do the rest. I closed my eyes. The deadline was tomorrow. 24 hours. My father had one day left to be the hero of his own story. After that, the story belonged to me. The conference room on the top floor of the Coleman Development Group building was a glass cage suspended 40 stories above the city. From here, the cars below looked like toys, and the people were invisible. It was a perspective my father loved. It made him feel like a god. Today, however, the gods were sweating. I stood at the head of the mahogany table, arranging a stack of files with precise, geometric alignment. My father, Grant Coleman, sat to my right. He was wearing his Navy power suit, the one he saved for closings and acquisitions. But his collar was loose, and there was a sheen of perspiration on his upper lip. Around the table sat the men who held the keys to his kingdom. There was Arthur Pendon, the philanthropist whose gala had been ruined. There was Gerald Fincher, the board member I had confronted at the club. There were 2 senior partners from the law firm that represented the Heritage Civic Trust, and the bank's chief risk officer, a woman named Sharon who looked at my father as if he were a bad loan she was eager to write off. Grant leaned over to me, covering his mouth with his hand. Just keep it brief. Madeline, he whispered, his breath smelling of mints and anxiety. Read the apology statement I wrote. Tell them we are conducting an internal review, then sit down and let the men handle the strategy. I looked at him. I saw the desperate hope in his eyes, the belief that I was here to be his shield, his secretary, his dutiful, uneducated daughter who would absorb the blow so he could remain standing. I did not nod. I did not smile. I stood up and walked to the whiteboard. I picked up a black marker. Good morning, I said. My voice was not loud, but it was projected from the diaphragm, a technique I used to command rooms full of panicked first responders. We are not here for an apology. We are here for a risk mitigation assessment regarding the imminent collapse of the Coleman brand. Grant blinked. The partners shifted in their chairs. Madeline, Grant said, a warning edge to his tone. Stick to the script. I ignored him. I uncapped the marker and wrote a date on the board. October 14th, 2014. This is the date of the payout. I said, I wrote another date. September 12th, 2014. This is the date of the structural failure at the West Side expansion. I continued. I drew a line connecting them. Current public narrative. The payment was a charitable donation to an injured worker. I drew a red X over the line. Actual evidentiary baseline. The payment was a silence fee processed 48 hours after a safety inspector threatened to shut down the site. The inspector was subsequently hired as a consultant by a shell company registered to the Heritage Civic Trust. The room went dead silent. The air conditioning hummed, a low drone of white noise. Arthur Pendon slammed his hand on the table. Now see here, Arthur sputtered. This is preposterous. Grant, control your daughter. We agreed to a strategy meeting, not an indictment. Grant stood up, his face flushing red. Madeline, sit down, he shouted. Gentlemen, I apologize. She is under a lot of stress. She does not understand the complexities of these transactions. I turned to face him. I did not shrink. I did not flinch. Sit down. Grant, I said. The command was absolute. It was the voice I used when a jumper was on the ledge. It was a tone that bypassed the conscious brain and hit the primitive instinct to obey authority. Grant froze. He looked at me, stunned. He had never heard that voice come out of my mouth. I turned back to the room. The anonymous leaker, I said, has given us a deadline, 12 o'clock today. If we do not issue a statement acknowledging the breach of safety protocols, they will release the full unredacted ledger. Sharon, the risk officer, spoke up. She was sharp, focused on the numbers. What is in the unredacted ledger? She asked. I looked at her. The names of the families. I said, the personal bank accounts where the funds were deposited, and the emails authorizing the transfers. Grant scoffed, forcing a laugh that sounded like dry leaves crunching. She is dramatic, he said to Sharon. Always has been. Look, Madeline is a sweet girl, but she never finished her schooling. She dropped out of her doctoral program because the pressure was too much. She is projecting her own failures onto this company. She is clearly confused. He looked at me with a pitying sneer. Honey, he said, dismissive and cruel. Go get us some coffee. Leave the business to the adults. It was the moment he had rehearsed for years. The moment he put me back in my box. The moment he reminded everyone that I was the broken one, and he was the provider. I walked over to my briefcase. I did not get coffee. I opened the leather flap and pulled out a single, thick file. I slid it down the length of the long table. It spun across the polished wood and came to a stop in front of Sharon. What is this? Grant asked. Frowning. Read it, I said. Sharon opened the folder. She scanned the first page, then the second. Her eyebrows shot up. These are credentials, Sharon said, looking at me with new interest. Certified Crisis Negotiator. Hostage Negotiation Certification from the Global Resolution Institute. A commendation from the Governor's Office for the Midland Hospital standoff. She flipped a page. And a contract history, she murmured. You are the lead consultant for the Ares Group? You handled the data breach for the city transit system last year? Grant stared at the folder. He looked like he was trying to read a language he didn't speak. That is impossible, he stammered. She answers phones. She lives in a walk-up. I live in a walk-up because I value autonomy over leverage. Dad, I said, and I left my doctoral program at Kipling University. Not because I couldn't handle the pressure. I looked at Arthur Pendon. I left because I was the lead researcher on the housing displacement study funded by the Heritage Civic Trust. I found that the trust was pressuring the department to falsify data to justify evicting 300 families for a new stadium project. When I refused to change the numbers, Professor Halloway told me I could either resign quietly or be blacklisted. Arthur Pendon went pale. He knew about the stadium project. It was his pet initiative. I chose to leave. I said, I chose to be uneducated rather than unethical. I looked back at my father. So do not talk to me about pressure. Grant, I eat pressure for breakfast. I am the only person in this room qualified to save you from the fire you lit. Grant sat down slowly. He looked small. The narrative he had built, the story of the strong father and the weak daughter, had just evaporated. One of the lawyers cleared his throat. Ms. Coleman, if these credentials are real, and assuming you are acting as an independent consultant, what is your recommendation? My recommendation is a controlled demolition. I said. I pressed a button on the console in front of me. The large screen on the wall lit up. It showed a video feed. Sloane Harper, the journalist, was sitting in a quiet office, looking into the camera. She looked poised, ready. This is Sloane Harper, I said. She has the story. It is ready to print. Grant looked at the screen with hatred. You brought the press into the boardroom? He hissed. You traitor. She is not here to destroy you. I said, unless you force her to. Sloane spoke from the screen. Gentlemen, she said, I have the ledger. I have the testimony. But my interest is not in a tabloid takedown of one man. My interest is in the system, the Heritage Civic Trust. She paused. If the board agrees to a full external audit, and if you agree to shield the lower-level employees who were coerced into signing these checks, I will frame the story around systemic regulatory failure. Grant Coleman will resign for health reasons. The company takes a fine. The trust is restructured. And if we refuse? Gerald Fincher asked quietly. Then I run the piece as a personal expose on Grant Coleman's corruption. Sloan said, and I name every board member who looked the other way. The room was silent. It was a good deal. It was a miraculous deal. It saved the company. It saved the partners. It only cost one thing: Grant Coleman's ego. We take it, Sharon said immediately. Now wait a minute, Grant shouted, standing up again. Resign? I built this company. I am this company. You cannot push me out. He looked around the room for an ally. He looked at Gerald Fincher. Gerald, tell them. Tell them we fight this. Gerald Fincher did not look at Grant. He looked at his hands. Sit down. Grant, Gerald said softly. Grant looked as if he had been slapped. Gerald? He whispered. I watched the exchange, and suddenly, the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. In Part 4, Gerald had claimed he was hacked. He had claimed Sarah, the archivist, had stolen the files because she had a grudge, but Sarah was a student. She didn't have the access codes to the deep archives. She didn't know the specific dates of the meetings unless someone pointed her to them. I looked at Gerald. I saw the resignation in his shoulders. I saw the lack of surprise when I had mentioned the ultimatum. It wasn't Sarah. I said, the room turned to me. Sarah didn't steal the files. I said, looking directly at Gerald, you gave them to her. Gerald closed his eyes. What? Grant whispered. Gerald is the leaker, I said. Or rather, he is the architect. He saw the ship sinking. Dad. He knew about the blackmail letters you were hiding. He knew it was only a matter of time before an external investigation caught us. If the feds found it, we all go to prison. If a whistleblower leaks it, we get a plea deal. I walked toward Gerald. You used Sarah as a cutout. I said, you fed her the documents. You let her send the emails. You wanted to force a crisis so the board would have to cut Grant loose and save the rest of you. Gerald looked up. His eyes were sad, but unrepentant. He was out of control. Maddie, Gerald said, gesturing to my father. He was bribing zoning commissioners on open lines. He was sloppy. I tried to talk to him. He wouldn't listen. He thought he was untouchable. I had to stop him before he dragged the whole foundation into a RICO case. Grant stared at his best friend. The betrayal was absolute. You rat, Grant choked out. I did it to save the company, Gerald said. And to save you from prison. You arrogant fool. The room was in chaos. The lawyers were whispering frantically. Sharon was typing on her laptop. But there is one thing you didn't account for. Gerald, I said. I picked up the remote and changed the slide on the screen. It displayed a document I had found in the stolen files. It was a draft of a press release, dated for tomorrow. It was titled, Statement Regarding the Termination of Peter Lewis, Project Manager. I looked at Grant. You weren't just going to resign. Were you? Dad, I asked. You had a backup plan. Grant looked away, his jaw working. Peter Lewis, I said to the room. He is the project manager for the North Side build. He is 40 years old. He has 2 kids. And 3 months ago, he sent a memo to Grant warning him about the concrete mixture being substandard. I tapped the screen. This press release blames the structural failure on Peter Lewis. It accuses him of negligence. It sets him up to be the fall guy for the entire scandal. Grant slammed his fist on the table. Someone has to take the blame, he shouted. We need a scapegoat. That is how business works. Madeline, you cut off the limb to save the body. Peter is a mid-level manager. We can pay his legal fees. He will bounce back. I am the face of this industry. I cannot go down. I looked at him. I saw the absolute moral vacuum at the center of his soul. He was willing to destroy a man's life. a man who had tried to do the right thing, just to keep his name on the building. And then I realized the trap I was in. If I exposed the plan to scapegoat Peter, I had to prove that Grant knew about the concrete issues. The only proof was the meeting minutes from 2016, the minutes that had my forged signature on them. If I entered those minutes into the record to save Peter Lewis, I was admitting that Madeline Coleman was a signatory to the fraud. Even if I proved it was a forgery later, in this moment, I would be implicating myself. I would be destroying my own name. I would be dragging myself into the mud alongside him. Grant saw the hesitation in my eyes. He smiled, a shark's smile. "You are smart. Madeline," he said softly, "you know how this works. If you burn me, you burn the family name, your name. You want to be a high-powered consultant? How does indicted co-conspirator look on a resume?" He was betting on my self-preservation. He was betting that I was. Deep down. Just like him. I looked at the partners. They were waiting. They were willing to let Peter Lewis take the fall if it meant the stock price stabilized. I looked at the screen. Sloan was watching me. I thought about Elias at the hospital. I thought about the families displaced by the stadium. I took a breath. In for 4, out for 4. I am not my father. I said. I pulled the file from my bag. The file with the forged signature. "I am submitting this into evidence," I said, placing it on the table. Grant's eyes went wide. "Don't you do it," he hissed. "This is the record of the meeting where the cover-up was authorized." I said to the lawyers, "It proves Grant Coleman had direct knowledge of the safety violations. It proves Peter Lewis is innocent." I pointed to the bottom of the page. "And this," I said, my voice steady, "is my name, listed as a witness." The lawyer picked it up. "You signed this?" he asked. "No," I said. "My father forged my signature to hide his crime. He used my identity without my consent. But I am verifying the authenticity of the document's content. I am placing myself at the center of this investigation to ensure that Peter Lewis walks free." Grant made a noise like a wounded animal. He slumped back in his chair, covering his face with his hands. He knew it was over. I had nuked the bridge. There was no going back. I turned to the board. "You have your deal," I said. "Sloan runs the story on systemic failure. Grant resigns effective immediately. Peter Lewis keeps his job. And I submit myself to the authorities for questioning regarding the signature." Sharon looked at me with something like awe. "You are going to blow up your own reputation to save a project manager?" she asked. I looked at Grant, who was weeping into his hands, not tears of remorse, but tears of a man who had lost his toy. "Reputation is just a shadow." I said, "Character is what casts it." I packed up my briefcase. "The meeting is adjourned." I said. The room cleared quickly. The partners, the lawyers, even Gerald. They all scrambled for the exits, eager to distance themselves from the radioactive fallout. I stayed. Grant was still sitting there. He looked shrunken in his expensive suit. "Why?" he whispered, not looking at me. "Why did you do it? I offered you everything. We could have ruled this city." I walked over to him. I looked down at the top of his head. I felt a wave of sadness, heavy and gray. I didn't hate him anymore. I just pitied him. "You never offered me everything, Dad," I said. "You only offered me a reflection of yourself." He looked up. His eyes were red, rimmed with panic. "What am I going to do?" he asked, his voice trembling like a child's. "They are going to take the house. They are going to take the club membership. Who am I if I am not Grant Coleman?" I reached out and placed a hand on his shoulder. It was not a gesture of forgiveness. It was a gesture of goodbye. "You are just a man, Dad," I said, "and for the first time in your life, you are going to have to live like one." I turned and walked toward the glass doors. "Madeline," he called out, "don't leave me. Fix this, please, fix this." I paused at the door. I looked back at him, sitting alone at the head of the empty table, the city skyline looming behind him like a judge. "I already did," I said. I walked out. I walked to the elevator. I pressed the button for the lobby. As the doors closed, I leaned my head against the cool metal wall. I felt a tear slide down my cheek. I let it fall. I had won. I had saved the innocent. I had exposed the truth. But as the elevator plummeted 40 floors down, I didn't feel like a hero. I felt like a daughter who had just buried her father. Even though he was still breathing, the worthless girl had destroyed the empire. But the price of the truth was the only family I had left. The doors opened. The lobby was full of people rushing to lunch. Oblivious to the fact that the sky had just fallen, I stepped out into the crowd. I had no alias. I had no job. I had a looming legal battle, but for the first time in 33 years, I was walking on solid ground. The hearing was scheduled for 9 o'clock in the morning at the Municipal Center. A brutalist concrete structure that smelled of floor wax and old paper. It was the kind of room designed to make you feel small, with high ceilings and fluorescent lights that hummed like a trapped insect. I sat in the back row, squeezed between a local news blogger and a retired teacher who had come to complain about zoning laws. I was not wearing my crisis negotiator suits. I was wearing a simple gray cardigan and slacks. To the casual observer, I was just a member of the public. But the air in the room was heavy with static. Down in the front, the press pit was full. I saw Sloane Harper sitting in the second row, her laptop open, her face unreadable. She caught my eye for a fraction of a second and gave a barely perceptible nod. She had kept her end of the bargain. The story she had drafted was focused on the system, the Heritage Civic Trust, and its lack of oversight. But she had also warned me, if Grant lied under oath today, if he tried to pin the blame on Peter Lewis, the deal was off. Grant Coleman walked in at 9:05. He moved with the sweeping confidence of a man who believes he can bend reality by sheer force of will. He was flanked by 2 junior lawyers who looked terrified. Grant was smiling, shaking hands with the bailiff, nodding at the council members. He treated the hearing not as an inquisition, but as a tedious formality he had graciously agreed to attend. He sat at the witness table, adjusting the microphone. He looked impeccable, the silver hair, the navy suit, the patriotic lapel pin. He looked like the father everyone wished they had. I felt a familiar ache in my chest, a phantom pain from a childhood spent trying to earn a smile from that man. But I breathed into it. In for 4, out for 4. That was not my father down there. That was a subject, a volatile element in a destabilized environment. The hearing began. The council chair, a stern woman named Eleanor Vance, tapped her gavel. We are here to review the compliance failures regarding the West Side medical expansion and the financial irregularities reported within the Heritage Civic Trust. Vance said, Mr. Coleman, you have prepared a statement? Grant leaned forward. He put on his glasses, a prop he used to look scholarly and humble. I have. Madam Chair, Grant said. His voice was rich, warm, and dripping with rehearsed sincerity. He began to read. Members of the council, neighbors, friends. For 30 years, Coleman Development has been a pillar of this community. We build hospitals where you heal. We build schools where your children learn. Recently, it has come to my attention that certain administrative errors were made during the hectic final days of the West Side project. He paused for effect, looking up over his glasses. I want to be clear. I take full responsibility for the culture of my company. However, the specific decisions regarding safety protocols were made by project managers who, frankly, were overwhelmed. We trusted individuals who were not up to the task. Specifically, a manager named Peter Lewis, who failed to report critical data to my office. I stiffened. He was doing it. He was throwing Peter Lewis to the wolves. He was breaking the deal, Grant continued, his voice gaining strength. Mr. Lewis is a good man, but he made mistakes. And now, jealous competitors and sensationalist journalists are trying to paint those mistakes as a conspiracy. They are trying to destroy a legacy of service because of a few clerical errors. I am here to set the record straight. I did not know about the inspection failures. I did not authorize the payments. I was betrayed by my own staff. He took a sip of water, looking mournful. It is a tragedy. Really. But we must move forward. The room was silent. For a moment, I thought he had done it. He was so convincing. He believed his own lie so deeply that it vibrated with the frequency of truth. Then, a voice cut through the silence. "Mr. Coleman, please save the theatrics for your investors." It was Councilman Reed, a young, sharp-eyed member of the Oversight Committee. He was holding a file folder. A blue file folder. I recognized it. It was the file I had given to the board yesterday. The file I had submitted to save Peter Lewis. Grant blinked, his smile faltering. "I beg your pardon. Councilman?" Councilman Reed opened the folder. "You claim you had no knowledge of the safety failures. Mr. Coleman, you claim Mr. Lewis acted alone. Yet, I have here the minutes from a board meeting dated June 12, 2016. Grant froze. He knew that date. In this meeting. Reed continued, his voice echoing in the chamber. "You explicitly authorized the transfer of funds to cover up the retrospective inspection fees. You also discussed, in detail, the structural integrity issues with the concrete. That is a fabrication," Grant stammered. "I never attended such a meeting." Reed held up a piece of paper. "Your signature is here, Mr. Coleman, and so is the signature of a witness. A witness who, according to these documents, can attest to your presence and your directives." Reed looked out into the audience. He scanned the faces until his eyes landed on the back row. "Is Madeline Coleman present?" The air left the room. Every head turned. The cameras swiveled on their tripods. Grant whipped around in his chair, his eyes searching the crowd wildly. I stood up. My legs felt heavy, but my spine was steel. I walked to the aisle. I could feel the eyes on me. Hundreds of them. I could hear the whispers. The daughter? The dropout? What is she doing here? I walked down the center aisle. The click of my heels on the linoleum was the only sound in the room. I reached the gate that separated the public from the proceedings. The bailiff opened it for me. I walked to the witness table. There was only one chair. Grant was sitting in it. He looked up at me. His face was a mask of panic and fury. "What are you doing?" he hissed, low enough that the microphone wouldn't pick it up. "Go home. You are embarrassing yourself." I looked at the bailiff. "May I have a chair?" "Please?" I asked. The bailiff brought a folding chair. I set it up next to my father. I sat down. I pulled the microphone toward me. "State your name for the record." Chairwoman Vance said, "Madeline Coleman." I said, my voice did not shake. It was the voice of Mara. "And your relationship to the accused?" "I am his daughter." I said. Grant let out a loud, scoffing breath. He leaned into his microphone. "Madam Chair, with all due respect, my daughter is not involved in the business. She has had some personal struggles. She dropped out of university years ago. She is not a credible witness to corporate finance. She is confused." He looked at me with a fake, pitying smile. "Maddie, honey, this is not the place for attention. Go wait in the car." It was the ultimate dismissal. He was using my trauma, my failure, to discredit me in front of the entire city. He was betting that the room would see a hysterical girl and a patient. Suffering father. I turned to look at him. I let the silence stretch for 3 seconds. "I am not confused." "Grant," I said. I turned back to the council. "My name is Madeline Coleman. For the past 8 years, I have worked as a senior crisis response consultant for the Ares Group. My specialty is high-stakes negotiation, corporate liability containment, and ethical compliance in disaster scenarios." A ripple of shock went through the room. Grant's mouth fell open. "I have managed data breaches for municipal transit systems, negotiated with armed combatants in hospital lobbies, and advised Fortune 500 companies on whistleblower protocols. I am not uneducated. I am highly specialized in the exact type of corruption we are discussing today." I opened my bag and pulled out my own copy of the document Councilman Reed was holding. Regarding the document in question, I said, my tone clinical and precise, "My name appears on the witness line. It is dated June 12, 2016. I looked at Grant. On that date, I was in a residential treatment facility in Arizona. Recovering from severe burnout after leaving my doctoral program, I was 2,000 miles away from this boardroom. I could not have signed this document. Grant's face turned a mottled purple. "She is lying," he shouted, losing his composure. "She is a liar. She has always been a disappointment." I continued, talking over him, my voice calm and relentless. My signature was forged. I said, "It was forged by my father. He used my name because he believed I was." In his words, worthless. He believed I was so disconnected from reality, so ashamed of my academic failure, that I would never look at the company records. He used my identity as a shield because he thought no one would ever listen to me. I looked at the cameras, but he made a miscalculation. He assumed that because I do not have his approval, I do not have skills. He assumed that because I am quiet, I am weak. Grant stood up, knocking his chair over. "This is a setup," he screamed. "She is working with them. She is trying to ruin me because I cut off her allowance. Mr. Coleman, sit down," Chairwoman Vance ordered. Grant did not sit down. He pointed a shaking finger at me. "You are nothing," he yelled, his voice cracking, spiraling into a high-pitched keen. "You are a spectator. You watch life happen. I built this. I am the only reason you exist." I looked up at him. I did not feel fear. I saw him clearly for the first time. He was not a titan. He was a small, terrified man who had built a castle out of sand and was screaming at the tide. "I am not a spectator. Dad," I said softly into the microphone, "I am the witness. And today, I am testifying." I turned back to the council. The document contains details about the concrete mixture that only the CEO would know. If my signature is a forgery, which I can prove with travel records, then the entire document is fraudulent. But the content matches the internal emails I recovered from the server. Grant Coleman knew the building was unsafe. He knew Peter Lewis tried to stop it, and he authorized the bribery of the inspectors to cover it up. Grant slumped back against the table. The fight went out of him. He looked at the audience. He saw the faces of his peers, his neighbors, his competitors. They were not looking at him with admiration. They were looking at him with disgust. And they were looking at me with respect. He realized then that the worthless daughter had just outmaneuvered him on the biggest stage of his life. He realized that the skills he had mocked, the listening, the patience, the observation, were the weapons that had taken him down. He covered his face with his hands. A sob escaped him, a jagged, ugly sound. "I did it for the family," he whispered. "I did it for the legacy. Legacy is not what you build. Dad," I said, "it is what you leave behind, and you left behind a lie." The hearing dissolved into chaos. Reporters were shouting questions. The council members were conferring loudly. The bailiff moved toward Grant. Chairwoman Vance banged her gavel. "Order! Order!" She looked at me. "Ms. Coleman, thank you for your testimony. This council will be referring these documents to the district attorney's office immediately. We are also recommending a suspension of all Coleman development permits pending a criminal investigation." She looked at Grant. "Mr. Coleman, I suggest you get a lawyer, a criminal lawyer." The hearing was adjourned. The room erupted. Sloane Harper was the first to reach the rail. She gave me a thumbs up. She had her story. The daughter who toppled the king. I stood up. I felt exhausted. My bones felt like lead. Grant was still sitting there. He looked catatonic. The junior lawyers were packing up their briefcases, trying to distance themselves from him. "Dad," I said. He did not look up. "We have to go." I said, "The press is going to block the exits in 5 minutes." He stood up slowly. He looked frail. He walked like an old man. I led him out the side door, flashing my old credentials to the guard, a reflex I hadn't realized I still had. We moved through the back corridors of the municipal center, avoiding the cameras. We stepped out into the alleyway behind the building. The air was cold and gray. It started to drizzle. Grant leaned against the brick wall. He loosened his tie. He looked at the sky. "It is over, isn't it?" he asked. His voice was hollow. "Yes," I said. The business is gone. The reputation is gone. You will probably face charges." He looked at me. For a moment, I saw a flicker of the old Grant, the arrogance, the entitlement. "You could have stopped it," he said. "You could have signed the paper. You could have been a good daughter." I buttoned my cardigan against the wind. "I was a good daughter. Dad, I stopped you from sending an innocent man to prison. I stopped you from hurting more people. That is what a good person does." He laughed bitterly. "You ruined me. You ruined yourself." I said, "I just turned on the lights." He looked down at his shoes. They were expensive Italian leather, now scuffed and wet from the rain. "What do I do now?" he asked. It wasn't a rhetorical question. He was asking for instructions. He was asking the crisis manager to manage his crisis. "How do I get home?" he asked. "My driver. He probably left. The press is out front. Madeline, help me." He reached out a hand. It was shaking. I looked at his hand. I remembered all the times that hand had waved me away, all the times it had slammed on tables to silence me, all the times it had pointed at me in judgment. He wanted me to fix it. He wanted me to drive him home, make him tea, and tell him it would be okay. He wanted me to be the worthless daughter who served him, or the expert daughter who saved him. I was neither. I stepped back. "You can call a taxi." "Dad," I said, "there is a stand on 4th Street. He looked shocked. "You are leaving me here? In the rain?" "I am not your fixer," I said, "and I am not your victim anymore." I adjusted my bag on my shoulder. "I am going back to my life. Dad, the one I built without you, the one you thought was small. It turns out, it is big enough for me." I turned and walked away. "Madeline!" he called out. "Madeline, come back!" I did not stop. I walked down the alley, the rain misting on my face. I heard his voice fade behind me, lost in the sound of the city traffic. I walked toward the subway station. I had no job. I had just publicly admitted to being involved in a fraud scandal. Even as a victim, my future was uncertain. But as I descended the stairs into the station, I felt a strange lightness. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I deleted the contact labeled Dad. I stood on the platform, waiting for the train. I saw my reflection in the dark glass of the advertisement booth. I saw a woman who was tired. I saw a woman who was grieving, but mostly, I saw a woman who was whole. The train arrived with a rush of wind and light. I stepped on board. The doors closed, sealing out the noise of the city, sealing out the past. The train moved forward, and so did I. Thank you for listening to this story. It has been a journey into the shadows of family duty and the light of personal truth. I hope Madeline's choice resonated with you. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Where are you listening from? Have you ever had to stand up to someone you love to do what was right? Please subscribe to Revenge Stories for more tales of justice, resilience, and the turning of tables. Share your thoughts in English. I read every single one. Until next time.